This is the man K-Swiss tapped to help them develop the new Hypercourt Pinnacle. And it's one of the best playing tennis, outdoor basketball, and pickleball shoes I've ever put on. So I guess I'll just be shutting my mouth. Let's get into them. Thanks to K-Swiss for sending me a pair of these to check out. However, this video is not sponsored. As always, all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are all my own. They also did send me though some components of the shoe, so you can actually see them, in real life outside of the shoe, not just torn down. So that's gonna be pretty interesting. You can tell that a pro with very aggressive footwork and movement helped develop this, because every piece of this shoe is meant for incredibly aggressive play, whether it's tennis, outdoor basketball. These things are beasts. These are one of the best outdoor basketball shoes I've put on, or pickleball. The components of it, everything you can just tell was laser focused on performance. Now, of course, there are gonna be a few sacrifices along the way when you make a shoe this dedicated to performance. We'll get into those. They are few and far between. So starting off in the uppers, this is a hybrid slipper or booty tongue and three-piece tongue. You do get the option of a runner's knot. I found that if I used it or if I didn't, heel slippage was none to mild. Obviously using it really did not have any movement in the shoe at all. It was really fantastic. The tongue is a little bit thin. I may have had lace irritation for maybe 15 minutes and then it went away. Honestly, it wasn't that bad. It also does have two slip knots here in the very distal lace eyelets on the medial side that cinches down the lateral. So you are getting quite the strong lockdown in the forefoot. That is where you really start to see the crazy performance come into these shoes, because it's all about aggressive forefoot pivoting in these shoes. Now, as you go into the forefoot, it looks like it's like super bulky and substantial. And honestly, the padding underneath of it is thick, and you can feel the padding underneath of it, but it's so porous. And then the outer layer, this TPU weave on the outer layer, is so porous that it actually breathes really well. On the breathability test, it's only heated up 101.4 degrees. Look at the breathability mapping, you can kind of see where fog is coming out of these things. And typically on a booty liner shoe or a one-piece or slipper tongue shoe, it's really hard to get fog egress, whereas in these ones, just material choices did pretty well with these things. Now, as you go into the rear foot, you do get a decent amount of padding. That heel counter does go up pretty high. And on the outside of the shoe, there's like hard foam backing here. So it's a kind of like a quasi outrigger heel counter, but it does have a pretty strong internal heel counter. So stability side to side in the rear foot is fantastic. Look at this thing on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. This is the one thing I noticed. The burr does wipe off the white coating. It does not get through the drag guard though. So there's like a clear coating underneath of that. You can see the other TPU, but the TPU itself is super strong too. So you also get rubber that comes up and it kind of humps up over the uppers. It doesn't just come up over it, but it actually creates this pretty bulbous, almost medial flange on the shoe. So when dragging or sliding, that outsole rubber is going to protect this a lot more than some other shoes would. The one thing that I did notice is with these X-cinch, I think that's what they're called, but these slip knots here in the forefoot, when you tie it down, plus with all the padding in the forefoot, that thick padding, the volume in the forefoot is really low. So these things do have quite a bit of break-in in the forefoot. It's not uncomfortable, right? I didn't rub or anything like that, but you can definitely feel the low volume of them. They just take some time to break in. I'd say it's about an hour or two of break in, and then the front part of the shoe becomes a little more buttery, but that's more a feature, not a bug. It's meant to strap your forefoot in really secure so you can pivot and make really aggressive side to side movements and have that shoe interact with you really intimately in that one-to-one configuration. So it's always a pretty intimate feel in the forefoot. Not in terms of width, that's a different story in terms of height. And getting into midsole teardown, the one thing you cannot fault K-Swiss for is build quality. These are some of the best built shoes I think I've ever torn down. To be quite honest, I'd say the only weak spot in these shoes, maybe that little bit of that drag guard, the coating of the drag guard. I mean, getting through this was just an absolute nightmare in the very best way, right? Actually, anytime you see me have to get out my metal shears, you know it's going down. But what's underneath of this is actually this huge carbon fiber shank. Now, the interesting thing about this shank is it goes into the rear foot and then it extends into the forefoot. It kind of crosses that mid zone, right? So it kind of goes halfway into the rear foot or like a third into the rear foot, then about, I'd say halfway to 3/4 of the way into the forefoot. But it also has this little leaflet here on the lateral side for more pivoting power. As you can see from the uppers now into the midsole, you can see what this thing is all about, pivoting power. This thing is actually semi-flexible, but it's so long and it's sandwiched in between the foam that it really does kind of bring that whole midsole together. And you do get shock spring foam here in the forefoot and then Surge Light in the rear foot. Now those foams are incredibly comfortable. Just watch my latest Hypercourt Supreme video, you'll kind of see. Thing is, look at this thing on the bounce height test, only got 29 centimeters in the rear foot, 24 in the forefoot. Now in the forefoot, it's the carbon fiber shank that's deadening that ball bearing. But in the rear foot, that's kind of typical for Surge Light or for shock spring foam for that matter. They are much more, foams that need activated, and they're much more of comfortable shock absorbing foams. The carbon fiber shank is what's doing all the launch. That's what's giving you all the pop in this shoe, both front to back as well as side to side. And so it's a great combination of both really buttery, comfortable feeling foam, but also just this rocket ship, right? This diving board right underneath of it. All right, but getting into the outsole tread of the Hypercourt Pinnacle, this is kind of like a modified herringbone. It's almost like a wet weather tire pattern, just kind of broken up herringbone. It's almost like a lazy Z pattern on the lateral side of it, but just super chunky, thick tread that goes all the way throughout the shoe. Now these do slip on the grip test ramp at 36 degrees, which is pretty typical for, for most tennis shoes out there. It also has a medial flange on the heel for a little bit more push off power. We'll talk about that in the fifth section as well. These things, what I found was they were a little bit more grabby than some other more maximalist shoes out there. They felt a little bit more, I'd just say tacky to the ground, a little more feel on them. Thing is, the durometer comes in at 14.75. It's not super hard rubber, but it is thick rubber. So it's gonna take a while to get through it. Honestly, you look at these things on the outsole durability test though, 10-second test grit sandpaper, I didn't get a millimeter of damage on this. So I mean, the chemistry of the rubber is good. I think time will tell, see what people are doing to these, how aggressively they're sliding them. I will say it did start to wash away the micro gritting on these after a few uses. Remember that micro gritting means that each line of tread is stamped individually. So you're getting micro and macro traction. I did start to wear through that, but I wasn't wearing through anything else. I would just say in terms of feel for a shoe with this thick of rubber and this chunky of tread, I just thought was absolutely fantastic. If we look at the Hypercourt Pinnacles on the speed ratio, that's the one thing about this that I think just criminally underrates this shoe. Comes in at a 1.65, shank score of 0.4 brings that up to a 2.05. And to be honest, these were one of the fastest shoes I've ever put on. It's the shank, right? It's the full length shank. So, some other K-Swiss shoes might not have a ton of, launch, like the Hypercourt Supreme too, right? It's a buttery shoe, and yeah, it's quick, it's light, it's bottom light. So yeah, you can bring a lot of speed to it, but these things bring a lot of speed to the table themselves. So like I said, that shank really, like I said, and the fact that you're getting such a one-to-one fit in the forefoot, right? That this shoe is more of an extension of your leg. So the shoe's giving so much back in terms of when you're actually activating the shoe. So yeah, I would say, especially on, like my universal rating system, these are a 5 out of 5 speed shoe, easy for me. All right, but getting into the fit of the Hypercourt Pinnacles, they're honestly a little bit misleading with when you look at them on the bottom. They only have a 10-degree inflare in the forefoot, but they also have a 10-degree inflare in the rear foot from center. So it looks like it's more C-shaped than it really is. It's just that medial flange kind of doing that. They are incredibly stable shoes for sure. Now, these do come in pretty true, 28.8 centimeters in length, 9.6 centimeters of metatarsal width, 10.4 of toe box width, and then 24-degree toe box taper. So they're actually pretty mellow in the forefoot. I did not have any problems with width or break-in on these with my 2E width foot. I'd say if you're a narrow foot, honestly, I'd probably still go true to size in these because, like I said, the volume is so low, you're probably gonna have a nice time in these, right? You're gonna have more room than anybody else is gonna have in them if you're a low volume, narrow foot. I'd say a medium and 2E go true to size. If you're a 4E, I think you can go up 1/2 size on these things. If you're a high volume foot, that's where you actually might wanna go up to 1/2 size, right? If you're a real bulky foot, real high end, something like that. I think that's where you might wanna go up to 1/2 size because, like I said, width-wise, they're really not that bad. The toe box taper, it really isn't terrible. But in terms of the snake bitten foot, in terms of heel pain, great. I mean, Surge Light as well as shock spring, super comfortable foam. In terms of arch pain, yeah, I mean, I think they're great. That carbon fiber shank's gonna hold these up really well. In terms of ball of foot pain, arthritis, big toe joint arthritis, they're gonna protect you, fantastic. It's just like plantar foot pain, like bursitis, things like that, maybe you have like hard calluses, things like that. That's where you probably need an orthotic because that carbon fiber is so close to the top. If you are gonna put an orthotic in these, This is one of the ones I actually probably would go up half size on, just to get more room in the forefoot, more volume in the forefoot. That's why I'd be going up that half size. In terms of ankle sprainers, I mean, there's not a huge flange, but remember, this carbon fiber clip goes out there, and it's not the clip that's really the big deal, it's what it's attached to. So you got this clip here, plus it's cased in TPU, which is great, but then it's attached to this giant shank. So when you're putting all your body weight down, you're getting the stability of the entire shank on the lateral side. So even though the lateral flange isn't enormous, it's there, but it's the way it's engineered, right? The TPU on top of this little clip, which is also attached to all of this, is what's imparting stability to the shoe. So like I said, really the only augmentation would be forefoot pain. And if you don't have forefoot pain, I don't really think you're gonna notice it, but that'd be the only thing I would say. Orthotics up a half size if you're concerned about the front part of your foot. Everything else, fantastic on its own. And in terms of the performance of the Hypercourt Pinnacle, right now on the market, this is, if not the best, one of the best out there. It is quick, it is rugged, it is stable. Your feet just feel like they got power underneath of them. That's all I gotta say. Like I said, they're not the most buttery shoes on the planet. This shoe is definitely meant for more performance. They're not uncomfortable by any means, but you know, with the UltraShot 4 coming out, which is one of the most comfortable shoes out there, it is interesting the difference in the lineup of shoes. I'd say this is great for everybody from serve and volleyer, baseline grinder, all court player. It really doesn't matter. You can play pickleball in them. They're fantastic playing pickleball shoes. I did, and I thought they were great. That carbon fiber shank and everything else, it's kind of unnecessary, but it's great. I mean, you're getting low for ball, just spring back up. I just noticed the recovery on these, the recovery potential from compromised positions, the ease of getting to net in these things, you know, for serving and volleying or just, you know, tracking down balls. It's fantastic. And like I said, you can tell what this was designed for. It was designed for rugged performance, and I think that they just absolutely nailed it. It's interesting, K-Swiss to me in the tennis space reminds me of what New Balance is becoming in the basketball space, just like leapfrogging everybody. And I mean, I got the UltraShot 4 coming out. It may be already out by the time you watch this video. Make sure you look out for that review. But in terms of the lineup, specifically the Hypercourt Supreme 2, the UltraShot 4, and now the Hypercourt Pinnacle, this is maybe the best all-around lineup right now in the tennis space. And to me, like I said, they just kind of leapfrog. So super excited to see what comes down the pipeline from K-Swiss, because it's pretty good stuff. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you do want to see what I'm talking about with the Hypercourt Supreme 2, I'll leave that video linked right here. And when the UltraShot 4 video comes out, that review, I'll leave that linked right here. Make sure you subscribe to the main channel, the Foot Dr. Zach channel, as well as the Foot Dr. Zach Dubs channel, where all the super niche tennis and pickleball content is going to be getting dropped. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.